Pastor Mike, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Max Radio between now and 1. Kerry Sharpe MLC is on, the Isle of Man's Children's Champion. Took the role last year. She was elected to LegCo in 2018. And also in the studio, Lawrie Hooper MHK, one of the Ramsey MHKs, and DHSC Minister. So, for the next hour, we'll talk about children on the Isle of Man, and in particular with Kerry Sharpe. First of all, Faster Mai, good afternoon.
Faster Mai.
Good to see you. And Lawrie Hooper, Faster Mai, good afternoon.
Faster Mai.
Kerry Sharpe, the Isle of Man Children's Champion is to look after vulnerable children, give vulnerable children a voice. Why did you take the job?
Well, gosh, I suppose that goes back 10 years, really. So it was 10 years ago, more or less this month. But I was invited to a do by a friend, and I ended up sitting next to John Knight, who was the CEO of the Children's Centre at the time. And we got talking, and he said, "Oh, I believe you used to work in television, and you know, you write. Would you be interested in writing a book about our 150-year anniversary of the Children's Centre?" So I thought this looked really interesting, and I looked into it a bit more. And I agreed. So then that led to quite a few years of research into how, you know, as an island, we've looked after our vulnerable children. And I suppose off the back of that, that's how I got involved with talking to MHKs. And then when the 2018 election came up, one of them asked me to stand. So I've always had that interest. And to me, I feel responsible because that's sort of what got me into Tynwald. And then in the last administration, I was a member of DHSC, and I had political responsibility for children and family services. So when the new administration started 2 years ago, I kind of felt like, you know, that I'd really like to sort of continue with a similar role, you know.
Is it fair to say you uncovered what happened at Notfield?
Well, I don't know whether I'd say that, whether I'd take, you know, personal responsibility for all of that. But I like to hope that I did play a large part in that through my research and people talking about their experiences.
Well, I don't want to go entirely into Notfield, but I'm just wondering how you felt when you discovered what had happened. What were your feelings?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. We don't really want to go into that area. It's not because I don't want to talk about it, but because I have been told that people are very triggered by even the mention of the Douglas Children's Home as it was at the time. But when I did discover what had happened during the 1970s, I was just very shocked that it wasn't better known, and that when I looked for certain bits of evidence in the museum, you know, like on the microfeatures and stuff, looking for old newspapers and things, they just weren't there. There were certain periods where those newspapers are missing, and I was sort of shocked at the idea that, you know, there's definitely been, you know, information kind of wiped in the past.
So as we head towards the future, obviously there is work to be done on the Isle of Man. How far are we down the line to making the most of the lives that are lived by vulnerable children and children in care on the Isle of Man, do you think?
Well, overall, I would say that from the meetings that I've had with children who are in care, that is children who are fostered or children who are in residential homes, I've had really positive conversations with them overall, and I have no reason to believe that there's anything happening that I don't know about. But I think our ambitions for our children who are in care are really not high enough, I would say. I think that we have got the opportunity on the island, because we're only a small island when you think about it. So there's only 79 children who are looked after, and you think, come on, that's only like 2 large classrooms of children, we could know them all by name if we had to. So, like, we should, in theory, be able to get everything exactly right. We should be able to provide the very best children's services. But they need resourcing. That's the point. They need resourcing.
Okay, Lawrie Hooper, MHK. Lawrie, where does the DHSC fit into this particular architecture of children?
So, in terms of the health and care service, obviously, Manx Care now provide the services that were previously provided by the department, but really it's our role within the health and care service to actually provide that corporate parenting function. So we're the ones that have commissioned through Manx Care the kind of residential care facilities, the fostering service, all that is delivered by health and care. So a big chunk really of responsibility for looked after children, does sit primarily with the department and with Manx Care.
In terms of finance, I mean, obviously everybody's going to say nowadays there aren't enough resources, but where does it sit within your budget?
Yes, so predominantly it does, not entirely. So, for example, some aspects of looked after children and the care that's provided sit within education in terms of things like the virtual head teacher role that exists and ensuring that looked after children get that kind of support and help that they need. But for the most part, the budget does sit within DHSC and within Manx Care. And I think, like I've said on previous occasions here with you, Andy, that the money that we have just has never been enough. I think the service has been historically underfunded. I think that is still the case today, and so that makes actually trying to invest in or develop some of these services a real challenge.
We are talking, and again, this is something, forgive me, I will repeat this, but we're talking about the lives of young children, one of the most precious commodities that we have on the Isle of Man. We're not talking about cricket bats or cars or tarmac on roads. These are young people whose lives we literally have in our hands. And how's the recruitment of foster carers and adoptive parents going at the moment?
So there is a live foster carer recruitment campaign going on right now, actually. So if there is anyone listening who has even contemplated fostering in the past, I would really encourage you to get in touch with the Family Placement Service in Manx Care. They do all sorts of training and support, and they provide lots of advice in terms of how you can be part of that process if that's something that interests you. So that process has been going on now for a number of weeks. So hopefully what we'll see after the back of that is actually an increase in the number of people who are able to foster, because we have seen a bit of a decline and stagnation, I think, in recent years, because there hasn't been a recruitment campaign like this done for quite some time, actually. And I think in Mrs. Sharpe's report, she picks up on the fact that we haven't had a coordinated foster care recruitment campaign done for a number of years. So it's good to see that process back on its feet again.
Okay. Kerry Sharpe, what sort of people become foster carers?
Well, I mean, anyone who is interested in foster caring should definitely contact Children and Family Services, because I think in the past, I remember talking to someone recently who said, oh, I really wanted to foster care, but I was over the age of 30 and I wasn't allowed to. You see, this was back in the 1970s. Whereas now, these kind of barriers don't exist. So, you can be a straight couple, you can be a gay couple, you can be a single person, you can be an older foster carer. All you have to do is to have the time and the patience and to really want to make a difference. I mean, as Lawrie was saying, there hasn't been any foster care recruitment since 2018, and I find that absolutely extraordinary, and I don't know why we haven't all been jumping up and down about it. I mean, there are reasons why. I mean, in terms of there was COVID, and there was a new foster caring system that was brought in called Mockingbird, which would give a lot more support to foster parents, and so for a while recruitment was put on hold. But to my mind, to have not had any since 2018 is diabolical, really.
It's funny, I remember, and this is one of the reasons when I was thinking about this particular programme, 20 odd years ago doing Mannin line, I remember setting off, and you wouldn't be able to do it now, but we sent off 88 balloons out on Douglas Head because there were 88 children that were in the system. I think at the time it was McCaw's was the organisation that was running it. So with the number of children in care, the number of, if you like, the lack of foster parents, I mean, is this just par for the course? Will we always keep it about there? Or do you think we could really drill down and get most of them into foster care?
Well, it would be nice to think that we could. I mean, if you look at what happened when the Ukrainian war started, there were people who came out and volunteered to take refugees into their own homes. And I would like to think that the Manx public is known to be very generous. We're a close community, caring community. And it would be great to think that more people, now they're being made aware of the fact that we need foster carers, will come forward. I mean, as it says in my report, we have the lowest percentage of children who are looked after in foster care in the British Isles, and we have the highest percentage of children who are looked after who are in residential homes at the moment. And I would really like to see that.
You think there are too many children in residential care?
Well, we know there are, because if I look at my notes here, the number of children in residential homes has increased from 34% in March 2022 to 40% in March 2023. And this is way above what the baseline target should be, which is 25%.
Okay, and in residential care means where? Whereabouts
It means living in a children's home. So children's homes these days are not like they used to be. You don't have like one big home. There's 6 residential, ordinary-sized houses in residential areas. And, I'm not denigrating the staff who work in those homes. I've been around and visited the children's homes, and the staff are really dedicated and hardworking, and they have a good relationship with the children. But there are many academic papers that have been produced showing that outcomes for children, if they're in foster care or if they're with friends or family, if they can't be with their own parents, their outcomes are much better than if they have lived their life in a residential children's home.
Do we provide, are the social workers on the Isle of Man, are they Manx social workers? Do we get them from across? How does that work?
Well, there has been ongoing problems getting enough social workers to work in children's social work historically, and the service has had to rely on agency staff, and that's not a great situation for many reasons, but most of all for the children.
Yes.
Because you get agency staff, you get high turnover, and
presumably agency means more, they cost more.
Well, generally agency staff do cost more. So it's not ideal, but it's a situation that you see right across Britain, actually, when it comes to lack of social workers, lack of nurses, etc. But we could do with more of our own homegrown social workers, and specifically for children's services, and work to keep them in children's services.
Lawrie Hooper, the Minister. So DHSC, I'm trying to get this matrix correct then. DHSC at the top, Manx Care administering this, but presumably there's multi-agency here, because other agencies, just tell me, what is St Christopher's? What does that do?
So there are some parts of the service that are commissioned out by Manx Care, so they're provided by, in this case, the third sector rather than the private sector. And so it used to be that organisations like the Children's Centre, for example, were commissioned to do service and provide some of the services that are now done. So St Christopher's do a part of the service around things like wraparound care, for example, the more holistic approach, and they also run the care facility itself, I think, is also administered by them. I think it's fair to say that the challenges we have on Ireland, I don't think it's quite as simple as looking at the statistics, because what I think the service tries to do is say, well, what's right for that child and where should they be? And I think at the moment we sort of operate a service that says, well, this is the service that's available, and that's kind of the service you get, whereas where we're trying to move to is a system that says, what are your needs? are you better placed in a residential home or in foster care? Actually, what is right for the child? And when we talk about foster care here as well, don't forget we're not talking about, when people think of foster care, what they immediately think of is a child moving away from their family and going somewhere else. Actually, quite a lot of the time, foster care and placements can be with family members as well, and that's really important for people to remember when we're talking about this. It's not necessarily what you might think of traditionally as, a foster family, you move to a different town and all the rest of it. Actually, a lot of it can be done and is often done by family of the child, which I think is quite often the service's preferred route, is to say, well, actually, you don't want to separate children unless you absolutely have to. So, getting them back home with their parents should be the first preferred aim. And then if that can't be done, it's how do you keep them in the right place for that child? And I think that's where we're trying to get to, rather than just looking at the statistics and saying we should have an arbitrary target around how many kids should be in placement or in home. I think it's probably a bit more nuanced than that in reality.
Well, what are the metrics for success as far as the department's concerned?
That's actually a really good question, because we're asking ourselves that question right now. So if you look on the department's website, we have a system oversight framework which has all of our KPIs and metrics in it for Manx Care. And around looked after children, they include things like the number of children contributing to their looked after children plan, the number of children that have got an educational plan in place, a PEP. And those kind of metrics, actually, some of them are quite useful. So it's useful to know, for example, that every child should have a PEP in place and they should be contributing to it. But when it comes to actually, what do we mean by contributing? Is a 5-year-old able to contribute in the same way as a 15-year-old? And how does that affect what we should be asking Manx Care to report? So again, sometimes the headline statistic doesn't really tell you anything. If I was to say 90% of children are contributing to their looked after children's plan, that sounds great in practice. But actually, when you look at it, if those 90% of kids are all 5-year-olds and they're not really able to engage properly with the process, does that really mean anything for us from a quality perspective? And so if anyone is interested in those metrics, they're published on the department's website. There's quite a lot of them. We are going through that process at the moment of looking at, well, what should we be asking Manx Care to measure? What should we be reporting on? Because actually, I think what we've done historically is we've reported on things that we've always reported on, rather than taking a step back and saying, what is it we're trying to know? What is it we're trying to achieve? And what should we be focusing on? Because I think inevitably what gets done is what gets measured. So if we're measuring a particular thing, that's what the service will end up driving towards. And so we've got to make sure that what we're measuring actually has value and is telling us the right information, and then we can do the right analysis of that information, because otherwise we'll end up going off on a complete tangent with policy and strategy development based on what we think is useful data, but actually turns out to not be.
We're with Kerry Sharpe MLC, the Isle of Man Children's Champion. The DHSC Minister, Lawrie Hooper, MHK, is on as well. If you want to get in touch, got lots of messages to get to. If you want to call 66 13 68, text 166 177, email studio@manxradio.com. You can WhatsApp and get in touch. Just a couple of quick words, and you can probably just address these quickly as well. When they made this is a text to 397, when they made social workers exempt from work permits, it's led to a number of Manx workers being unemployed and replaced by agency staff at an additional cost to the taxpayer, a loss of experience and knowledge. Is that true? Are social workers exempt from the work permits?
I believe they are. I believe quite a lot of key workers actually are exempt from work permits, which is one of the reasons that DfE are looking at completely reforming the work permit process, because the vast majority of jobs are actually exempt from work permits. That's been the case for quite a while. It's not really openly talked about, but that's the reality of the case. I'm not aware that there's a glut of social workers who are on the island who are unemployed. There are definitely social work jobs currently out for advert. You see them quite regularly on Job Train, so I would encourage anyone who is interested in a permanent, substantive job as a social worker on the Isle of Man to just apply for those jobs. The jobs are out there being recruited kind of as we speak. So
can you train as a social worker on the Isle of Man?
I think I'm not sure of the answer to that, if I'm honest, Andy. I think I'd like to say yes would be the answer, that you can train, but I don't know if that's the case, because some of it involves certain types of work and certain types of registrations that you have to go through. So I know there is training offered for social workers, but I couldn't honestly put my hand on heart and say you can definitely do the whole bit of training on the island. It is definitely somewhere I'd like to get to have a program that's kind of analogous to our nursing training, where we do say if you want to train in this role, the whole thing is offered on the island and it can be offered. But at the moment, I can't confidently say that's the case.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I know in the last administration, Children and Family Services did start a Grow Your Own social worker scheme. And they did produce social workers, but I believe quite a few of them then moved to adult social care. So it's keeping them in children's services.
Just a bit of common sense. Texter 553 says, "Look, Andy, not everybody can foster. They have to obviously be cleared by police checks. They have to be DBS checks and everything." And just another question. So somebody said, "What's the maximum age for fostering? Then is there a maximum age?"
I have no idea. I think it would depend on the individual. I know that people who are interested in fostering and they get in touch with children and families, it's a very long, process that people go through in order to finally become foster carers. All the aspects of the person's life will be looked at. But I really don't think that the age would be a barrier.
Okay. A note in from Helen. Thank you, Helen. She said, you and I, that's Helen and I, had a regular slot on fostering. I think we did. It was 20 years ago, Helen. We were a lot younger at that time. There was a team of two. I think a lack of current resources is a poor reason for fewer carers. We had at least 2 or 3 active roadshows a year to keep the issue at the forefront of society's awareness. Helen, if you could remind me, who was the lady who'd fostered about 60 people? She was a fearless, tireless woman. I remember her, interviewing her at the top of Douglas Head, and she'd had many children go through the system, and they all absolutely adored her. So recruitment front and centre then, Kerry.
Absolutely. We should be recruiting constantly. And I know from conversations with children and families that they, as a division, are very keen to recruit. In fact, the soft recruitment, which they launched in the summer, children and families themselves have put together the posters, and they've gone around the island. They put up posters in GP surgeries, in schools, shops, everywhere you can go. And they're attending different summer events. And existing foster carers have also agreed to take part and to talk to the public. But they have had to sort of take the recruitment process on themselves because they weren't getting the sort of the technical assistance that they needed. And I think that in part is because Manx Care's got such a huge remit. And of course, it's going to start off with the clinical side of things, the hospital, etc. And children and family services are kind of down the line, you know. And to my mind, children and family services tend to always get a bit overlooked, because if you're comparing children's services with people on the operating theatre table, you know, where are people's focus going to start? It's always going to be with the hospital. But that is the shame. I mean, in the last administration, I remember Children and Family Services was going to stay with DHSC. It wasn't going to go to Manx Care. And it was only at the very last minute that the decision was made to make it part of Manx Care.
Well, lots to talk about today. A quick call now. Let's get to Juan, who's with us. Hi, Juan. You're live with Kerry Sharpe and Lawrie Hooper.
Hey, good afternoon, Andy. Hi, Kerry. Hi, Lawrie.
Hi there, Juan.
Hi.
Hi. Andy, I have 2 questions. You want me to present them separately or together?
Together will be fine, thanks, Juan.
Okay, no problem. Kerry, I totally agree with what you were saying earlier on there, 100% for the future of our kids and the need protected. And it indeed is the future of the fabric of our island. On that note, I'd like to ask both of you your thoughts on the current RSE sex education curriculum and what is being taught to our children. Do you think it's appropriate what's being taught? Do you think that it's being delivered in the right manner? And would you say that it's sexualising young kids, putting pressure on their mental health and welfare as it is, especially on the sex change and transgender issue? The second question that I have is on fostering itself. And I believe, you have a shortage of uptake of fostering, and I see there seems to be a red flag flagging up with the Moss foster care unit that some of the children are getting put into residential homes with troubled and disruptive children, which may cause a problem down in the future. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that and what you're doing to alleviate that problem.
Kerry Sharpe?
Thank you, Juan. So these are really interesting questions. I would say on the RSE, the sex education question first. I mean, I'm a parent myself, and from my own experience, I felt that my children were being taught too much too soon when it came to sex education in school. I found that through talking to friends of theirs, the feedback I got was that the children were kind of presented at a very early age, like in year 7, sort of age 11, 12, with a whole kind of smorgasbord of possibilities. And then quite a lot of them went on to worry for the next 4 or 5 years about, am I straight? Am I gay? Am I bi? Am I whatever? And it was being taught so early before they actually had any sort of natural sexual urges that it worried them. And then in that sense, I think it did put, or it does put, undue stress on children. But then on the other hand, I've spoken to friends who work in schools, and they've said, yes, Kerry, however, for children who do sort of have dilemmas and think, well, am I transgender? It is very reassuring because, it's giving the very positive message, look, you can be whoever you want to be, and that's fine. And so I think that, that's what's important. But I think it's a very difficult balance to get so that because friends I have who are gay, most of them knew intrinsically from very early age, 3, 4, 5, that they were gay. For other people, that realisation will come much later. But for children who are already quite, sure in their own minds, then it's great to get that reassurance. But yeah, the balance is difficult to get, I would say.
And the second question?
And the second question, so fostering children going into residential care with older children. Yes, this is something which is in my report, which I'm really concerned about, is the fact that we don't have enough residential children's homes. Well, first of all, we don't have enough foster carers because, one, it would be so much better for them to go into foster care than residential. The second problem is we haven't got enough residential homes. So there isn't as much choice when children do come into the system as to where they should be placed. So what's happening at the moment is, and at the time of writing of my report, all of the children's homes, apart from one, were at maximum capacity. So you get more children coming in. Where are you going to put them? So that means that you have a situation where you do have younger children who are in the same house as much older children who may have various issues, and that is definitely not a situation you want. It's very damaging. But until we get that sorted out, until DHSC and MHK start talking and Treasury start talking together and working out how we can get more resources so we can get more residential homes and get more choice in placing children, then that's the situation we're in. And I agree with you, and it's very damaging.
Okay, Lawrie Hooper.
From my perspective, I haven't seen the RSE curriculum, so I'm not really in a position to comment. I can say that as a constituency MHK, I don't think I've had anyone raise it with me as an issue in Ramsey. So it's not something that I have any particular concerns over. I've got no direct experience with it, so it's not something I feel sensible, really, that I should comment on. All I've really seen is the same as the public have seen, is the extracts from the Education Department's report, which concluded it was age appropriate. I don't have any more insight into it, really, other than that. I mean, my little one's too young. He's not at that stage yet, so no experience there, unfortunately. In terms of the residential care, I think it's just accepted, and has been for quite some time, that we've not got enough residential care provision for looked after children. That's It's not a new problem, as is I quite often say when I'm talking about problems in the health service. This is not news to anyone who's been paying attention or has been involved. It is the result of 10 years of underfunding.
Any idea how big the budget is for that at the moment?
I don't know how big the budget is for the care group, unfortunately, not off the top of my head. But it isn't necessarily the running of the home that's the challenge. It's actually finding a physical location and then finding locations that are suitable. I mean, there's some people think, well, you could just buy a block of flats essentially and stick them all in the same place. But as I think has been highlighted by June, that isn't necessarily appropriate. You need to have the right facilities for the right kids at the right age and make sure there's enough place for them to kind of transition between the various services and support that's on offer. So it's a far more complex problem to solve than simply, just buy another building. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. And like I say, the reality is we are at the end, really, of at least a decade of the services being underfunded in terms of the amount of money they need. And so undoing the damage that was caused by that is not going to be done overnight. It's going to take time. It really is.
All right. Thanks, Juan. Good to hear from you. Thanks for that.
Cheers, Andy.
All right, we're live with Kerry Sharpe and Lawrie Hooper on Mannin Line today.
ShopRite. Shopping that's better all round. Shopping that costs less before you even start. Less travel, fuel and time. Because our stores are local to you. Prices? ShopRite has low prices as well as price matching. And Switch and Save is something else. Sainsbury's own brand. Hundreds of items you buy every day. Famous Sainsbury's quality assured, adding up to pounds less at the checkout. ShopRite, proudly locally owned.
When you save a little money, it means a lot these days.
If you're looking for bathrooms and tiles, you'll always find something new in store at Pacesetter. For surprisingly affordable prices and excellent choice, search online for Pacesetter Douglas. Or better still, visit the Pacesetter Bathroom and Tile Showroom on Harris Terrace and see the new styles in store.
You can get the best of everything, where the price is twice as nice.
No matter how much you need to dig, or how much you want to dump, Fox Group Isle of Man offer an extensive range of plant hire, long-term lease and sales. We're the island's exclusive supplier for Louis Gong excavators with immediate delivery. Our machinery comes with a complete service package with finance plan options. Call John on 458946 to discuss your plant needs. Fox Group Isle of Man, part of the Fox Group of companies.
Whatever your business, whatever its size, you can always rely on the island's leading fuel and oil supplier to keep you moving. Ellen Vannin Fuels, powering the island and powering industry. Call us on 844 000.
Tim Cullen MBA is an Associate Fellow of the Side Business School, University of Oxford, and was until recently Director of the Oxford Programme on Negotiation. Tim is best known for his role as the first Executive Director of the Small Countries Financial Management Centre, which he helped establish with the support of the Isle of Man Government, the World Bank and the Commonwealth Secretariat. Find out more about Tim's work on Perspective this Sunday at 12 noon on Manx Radio with me, Phil Gaughan. Does government investment in improving financial management in small and developing countries represent good value for taxpayers' money, or would we be better spending it on improving our own services?
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Talking to Kerry Sharpe MLC and Lawrie Hooper as well. And Wilf's with us. Hi, Wilf.
Hi, it's just a little bit of information for you. My sister did fostering most of her life, most of her married life. And I'm just got a photograph in front of me of her. I think it was somewhere around 60, somewhere around about 60 children. And I've got a photograph in front of me with her receiving an MBE from the Queen.
What's her name, Wilf?
Moira. Moira Callow was her married name.
And she 60?
Yes, I'm sure the figure was around 60, yeah.
And you can tell me then, Wilf, what? Obviously, she enjoyed doing it. She got something out of it. What do you think she gave back to the children?
Well, she's now dead and gone. That's but up till she died, most of those children always got back to her, no matter where they were in the world. They phoned her up and were talking to her and wishing her all the best and all that, and so she got a lot out of it, an awful lot.
All right, I appreciate that, Wilf. Thanks for calling today to Moira Callow. So, just putting the two sides together, Kerry Sharpe, if you have people who want to do this and who are able to do it, and there are children that need it, surely that's a no-brainer, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it was very interesting what Wilf was saying about the fact that the children that his sister Moira had fostered continued to be in contact with her, because it's that, we need more services provided for care leavers in general.
Hang on just a minute. Industry jargon, care leaver.
Okay, so so young people leaving care services, so say they've been in fostering or residential services, we in the UK we have there's care leavers legislation, so it actually puts it in statute as to what local authorities must provide for care leavers. And that could be anything from financial assistance to help finding accommodation to advice and support, that sort of thing. At the moment in the Isle of Man, we don't have any of that in legislation at all, and that needs to be changed as soon as possible.
So what happens? Do they leave care at a certain time, at a certain age? Is it arbitrary, or what happens?
So at the moment, Children and Family Services work to best practice. So if you leave care, you're assigned a social worker, and that social worker will stay in touch with you until you're sort of early 20s. But it's not actually, in law that government must provide that. So we need some leaving care legislation, and the Minister and I have discussed this before, and he's well aware of that and agrees as well. And it's something that his department is looking to bring in over the next couple of years, because a lot of people, they leave care, and if they have no family support at all, they're just going off into the world with nobody at all. And that's why it's so important to have someone to go back to.
But surely that doesn't happen, does it?
Well, okay, so care leavers will be assigned a social worker, and certainly the people I know who work in Children and Family Services, they will always be there if people who've left care come back, and sort of say, can I meet up with you for a chat or whatever. But there's nothing formalised, and it's so important that people have somewhere to go back to. And I've often thought that maybe we need, there's the drop-in centre which St Christopher's run, and that's open during the day, and that's for anyone who's left care. They can drop in and talk to people who work for St Christopher's and get advice and support. And young people they use that service all the time. But a lot of them report to me that they use the drop-in centre because they're lonely.
Yes.
Because it's too many young people who are leaving care have to go and live on their own in a bedsit, and they don't have any family, and they're lonely, and that's awful.
So having been supported for many years within the system, they can suddenly be on their own in a bedsit just looking at a tin of beans and a television.
Well, that's basically it. And I'm not saying that people who work in children's services don't care. They are very dedicated, but we don't have anything formal set up. Apart from, the drop-in centre, and that does work well, but it can only provide support during the day. And the workers there, I know they worry about the young people who come to them as well. They do worry about them.
How do they get on with employment?
Well, to my mind, too many people who leave care are on benefits and are not in employment. And this can be for, lots of reasons. But, one reason is that if you've had trauma in your family and it's bad enough for you to have been taken into care, or you've lost your parents, then very often your number one priority isn't like concentrating on doing your exams at school. You got to have a very stable home life to have the capacity to sort of work at exams and stuff. So you might not, if you're leaving care, have as many qualifications. And also, if you've been through lots of trauma, emotionally, you haven't matured at the same level as your peers, and you might need a bit of extra support. So it would be really great if we had more apprenticeships available for young people leaving care. In fact, at the moment, we don't have any officially at all. If we had apprenticeships available, I know, because I've discussed it with Children and Family Services, they would provide the wraparound support for that young person if the company or government, because really I think government should be offering this as well, if government wants to offer apprenticeships.
Okay. Jed, hi, Jed, you're live with Kerry Sharpe and Lawrie Hooper.
Hi, I'd like to ask them both about the problem that we've on the island regarding the dwindling number of helpers, volunteers, committee members for clubs that engage with children and young people, really. So you'd look at football clubs. I think, we can't really focus on sport entirely, but it's very important. But there's an obvious gap appearing, and I think we're aware of that. It's documented in the newspapers, football clubs and sports clubs having difficulties. I'd like to ask both of the panel, if you like, just as to what measures that could be taken to encourage adults, people with experience, to get involved in helping out in the community in such a way.
Kerry, Lawrie?
That's a really good question, and unfortunately I don't have an answer to that, if I'm honest. From people I talk to, part of the reason, I think, for a declining appetite, I suppose, for getting involved in these kind of things is due to a declining ability too. So in terms of people having to work more, people having less time themselves, less spare time, less free time to be able to do these kind of things. And I think that's, maybe a kind of a fallout really of some of the cost of living issues that we're seeing. It's off the back of COVID, and people finding it more difficult, I think, to find time for themselves and find time to then commit to these kind of organisations. It isn't great actually, but I don't think I have an answer. What we do see on the island, I think, is a lot of organisations that duplicate. So there's a lot of charities and third sector organisations that all do very similar things, if not the same thing. So maybe there is something that could be done, and maybe government has a role to play in this in terms of encouraging organisations to kind of work together a bit more closely, so that the demand then on people's time is less. If we have one charity doing something rather than 6, it might be that people working together means you need fewer volunteers overall, which may be something we could help with, I suppose.
Okay, Kerry Sharpe?
I think part of this will relate to the work that's going on at the moment in the Department of Home Affairs, which is looking at community partnership programmes, where you get key members of the community and you bring them together. So you might have police, teachers, social workers. You bring people together, and then you try and get something practical done on the ground. So that could be things that sort of appertain to children or older people. It's a kind of like if you think about the Men in Sheds initiative, it's similar to that, but you could do it for different parts of the community, including children. So I've got high hopes for that work that's going on. But I agree with the minister. It's like it's a shame that in such small communities we haven't still got that. Well, we did see the community spirit coming together during lockdown, didn't we? We saw people pulling together. And then after lockdown, people kind of disappeared into their own lives again.
Yeah. Final thought, Jed?
I think it's a real problem, and Kerry mentioned about the police initiatives, and those were going on, say, 12, 13 years ago. But I think we've got the MSR based at the DSHC, which is a great resource. I think we've got to widen that. But I think, again, when we talk about, this is in progress, this is going to happen, I think we need to take actual action. And I think we need some investment into training, so training of referees, umpires and all sorts, and having the safeguarding aspect covered. But it needs someone to take control. And it needs someone to really get involved and appointing, say, a champion to get a grip. And applying, the right principles, but it's all about people. And you know yourself, they're few and far between the volunteers and those people that give that spare time.
Okay, Jed, I appreciate your call. Thanks for being with us. A note in from Peter, who just said, I'm a registered social worker, previously worked on the Isle of Man, left just after Manx Care took over. I'm still in regular contact with some of my ex-clients, being the nearest thing that they had to a parent sometimes. On that note, I was invited to attend an ex-client's wedding this weekend. Peter, thank you.
Are you concerned about your eye health? Holmes & Davidson Opticians in Douglas are proud to offer the Eidon ultra-wide field retinal imaging and Heidelberg 4D OCT systems, state-of-the-art machines that allow early detection and management of eye diseases. Don't wait. Book your appointment today and ensure the health of your eyes with the best technology available. Call 676 230 or visit holmesanddavidsonopticians.co.uk now.
Here at Q-Plus, we're not just blue, we're green. From smart boilers to heat pumps, Q-Plus supply products from the leading brands in renewable energy for a cleaner, greener home. So call into Q-Plus on Snugborough Trading Estate, the island's largest independent plumbing and heating merchants for trade and retail. Or call 673 131 to talk to our friendly experts about the latest cost-effective products in home heating and find out what we can do for you at Q-Plus.
For all your motorcycle needs, ride on down to H&H Motorcycles. We offer new and used bikes for purchase for any budget. And you can trust H&H to deliver quality health checks, full service, repairs and suspension upgrades. H&H are totally motorbike mad. And you can also have a chat with Honda UK rider Nathan Harrison. Find us in South Quay Industrial Estate or call 665646. Ask for Dave. H&H Motorcycles.
The Isle of Man Government Conference is your chance to put questions directly to ministers about key topics of education, housing and infrastructure, and finance. 20th and 21st September at the Villa Marina. Registration is free, in advance or on the door. Visit gov.im/IOMGC. Building a better future together.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
With Kerry Sharpe MLC, Lawrie Hooper MHK. We're talking about children, and there was so much we could talk about. Helen came back to me and just said, I'm glad Wilf identified Moira Callow and also Brian. There were several more who did decades of being carers, ending the leaving care structure we had. They also abolished the youth justice system, which wasn't helpful for Manx young people. We need more action where this is concerned. You mentioned, Kerry Sharpe, that obviously this particular sphere of public policy doesn't... you mentioned that Manx Care has many priorities and DHSC. So, as you said, if somebody's on the operating table and needs an emergency appendectomy, then the resources are going to go there. So how do we get the ducks in a row so that this particular part of Manx Care, DHSC, gets more than it's getting at the moment, if you like, gets its fair shout of resources?
Well, what I'm hoping, Andy, is that obviously I've produced my report, the Ofsted report, which I can't talk about, but there's been an Ofsted report done and that's coming out soon. Between my report and the Ofsted report, I hope that this is going to make government sit up and listen and realise that it really does have to invest in our children, and in particular our children who are in care, those with complex health needs and complex disabilities who have been overlooked for too long.
We didn't even get to talking about children with complex needs and also the young carers situation, which is probably another programme in its entirety. I'm guessing there's not a status quo where this is getting, if it's not getting better, it's getting worse, isn't it?
Well, I suppose I'm looking at it in a 150-year perspective. I would say that services have been extremely neglected, and it's high time that government took seriously its responsibility as corporate parent, because government and Manx Care and Tynwald are corporate parent to these children, And, I would ask them, how much do they know about their corporate children? How much time do they give to their corporate children, I was surprised when I was researching for my report how little information DHSC at the moment has on its corporate children and what happens to them after they leave care. And I think that there's a bit of a breakdown really in data and information, and just generally government needs to know what exactly has happened to those 79 children, because as I said before, we could name them if we wanted to. We should know where they are and what stage of life they're all at, and government should be thinking, oh, but what about so-and-so? So-and-so's about to leave school. What are they going to do now?
Okay. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, Kerry, what's your email address?
So it's kerry.sharpe
with an E
at gov.im, or just Google Kerry Sharpe Isle of Man Children's Champion.
Okay. And final word, Lawrie Hooper?
Yeah, I'd say actually the issue that I'm seeing, it isn't government that's the challenge here. Government, I think, we know what the problems are, actually, and things like Kerry's report and the upcoming Ofsted report aren't really telling us anything new. They're just confirming, I think, with evidence and with data, the situation as we understood it to be anyway. The challenge, I think, is getting Tynwald to accept and understand this is a problem that needs resolving, that it needs investment, it needs support. I can count on one hand the number of questions I've been asked around children's care in the last 2 years, but horse trams are a greater priority for members, and I think that's the real problem, is when we're talking about, like Kerry says, we need to stand up and say we need to invest in this stuff. We need to invest in a lot of things, actually, across health and care, not just this particular area, but children and families, adult social care, mental health services, carers, support. The whole kit and caboodle needs proper investment, but when we get to Tynwald to talk about these things, inevitably what we end up talking about is something else that is someone's political priority, and I think that's the problem, is government can and wants to do more, I think, than we're being enabled to do by Tynwald itself, and it's a difficult conversation to have.
All right, thanks for that. Thanks to Kerry Sharpe, thanks to Lawrie Hooper today. Interesting Mannin line. If you have any thoughts, please do get in touch, and thanks to Ben and Howie on the phones today. WINT